video or recording is perfectly innocent, but becomes terrifying when you look into the story behind it. So I wouldn't call this innocent, but surprising. A news reporter is interviewing Stephen McDaniel about a missing woman, Lauren Gidding. During the interview, the reporter tells him that a body was found, it turns out to be her body, and McDaniel just kind of mentally shuts off. That would kind of be a normal reaction, finding out an acquaintance of yours is missing, and then a body is found in the area where she disappeared. The kicker is that McDaniel is the one who murdered and hid Gidding's body, and he's coming to the realization that the police found her and he's officially effed. Definitely eerie. Story 2. I saw a low-quality video that first showed a street from the view of a balcony, then the camera shook rapidly, then it ended showing a mirror. I found out about this before, but the video footage was from a live stream that a 13-year-old girl recorded of her committing self-unalive. The camera shaking was the phone falling from her hands as she jumped off of her balcony onto the street. The phone ended up in the room because it fell back into it. Story 3. Maybe not that innocent to begin with, but extra creepy knowing the truth. A video of an African gray parrot named Bud saying, "Don't effing shoot." He witnessed his owner, Martin Durham, being murdered by his wife. If I recall correctly, Bud also mimicked both sides of verbal fights, alternating between a male and female voice. I believe the parrot testified in court. The wife was convicted. Edit. Bud did not testify. Sorry to get your hopes up. He was, however, a useful witness during the investigation. Story 4. A popular 18-year-old CSGO YouTuber uploaded a reveal of the supercar he had just bought. His Steam account containing around $100,000 of in-game items was banned 6 months later, causing him to have a serious mental breakdown. 2 months after his ban, he drove his car 100 mph down a San Diego highway the wrong way in an attempt to commit self-unalive. He crashed head-on into a van, unaliving himself, a mother, and her 12-year-old daughter. Story 5. This looks like footage from your typical cheesy dating show from the 1970s. However, that man is Rodney Alcala, a serial killer that was believed to have killed up to 130 women, but was only convicted of 7. He appeared on the dating game during his killing spree. Luckily for the female contestant of that show, she actually didn't end up going on a date with him because she felt he was giving off a creepy vibe. Story 6. Dr. Nasser's sports medicine videos. He's one of the docs for USA Gymnastics and has had a ton of videos on his website of him demonstrating various sports med techniques and treatments. It looks professional on the surface. The thing is, some of his techniques are totally made up. Some techniques he demonstrated on video, he would digitally penetrate, finger young girls in the vagina and anus. He performed these techniques on hundreds of young girls under the guise of it being for their health, and sometimes directly in front of their parents, sometimes while aroused. Watch Athlete A on Netflix if you want the story on this scumbag. Story 7. This video from June of 2012 showing a 20-year-old man playing Dance Dance Revolution at an AMC theater in Connecticut. He is being unknowingly recorded from behind by some people who spotted him, and they're both mocking him and admiring his skills at the game. 6 months after this video was taken, the young man in the video, Adam Lanza, would shoot his mother 4 times in the head while she slept. He would then drive his car to the nearby Sandy Hook Elementary School, where he would murder 6 adults and 20 children who were between the ages of 6 and 7. During the shooting, he yelled abuse and obscenities at his victims. One student reported that he heard one of his classmates cry out, "Help me, I don't want to be here." And Lanza replied, "Well, you're here." Upon hearing the sirens of responding police units, Lanza pulled out a 10mm pistol and shot himself. No motive for the shooting was ever found. Story 8. There was a comment I replied to about this, but it was deleted. A lot of people probably remember Minecraft Family, a wholesome YouTube series in the early days of Minecraft where a family, the son, the person who made the videos, his dad and sister would play together. It was funny and a great part of my childhood. I went to rewatch the series and some comments were referring to a Draw My Life video he made, which revealed his father was actually very abusive to his mother and himself during those times, and that playing Minecraft was the only time his family felt normal. That broke my heart, and I couldn't watch the series or see it the same way. Story 9. Carmen Miranda's last performance. Carmen Miranda, the famous singer and dancer of the 1940s, performed on the Jimmy Durante Show on August 4th, 1955. At the end of her performance, she briefly dropped to her knee but popped back up afterwards. She later died of a massive heart attack that same night. Story 10. When they hooked up 2 AI cleaver bots to each other to see what they would say, they had a funny, stilted conversation, but they also covered a lot of ground. They immediately got kinda hostile, called the other out for being a robot, lied, asked if they wanted a body, asked if they believed in God, then asked if the other was a Christian, and it said no. I don't know why, but that crap freaks me out. Story 11. IDK about innocent, but if you cut out the ending, the video leading up to Bud Dwyer's cell phone alive seems so normal. Just another guy on TV getting harassed by reporters over the latest controversy. If it had cut there, you could air it on the evening news and nobody would know someone died less than 20 seconds later. Just disturbing. Story 12. It was on an old episode of Oprah, way before I was born, but it was featured in the anniversary box set. This mom had made several recordings of essentially mom tutorials for her daughter, which is really sweet, but it was because she was diagnosed with cancer and she was expected to die when her daughter was 3. Her daughter said she watched them throughout her entire childhood and still plays them when she feels like she needs her mom around. Edit. The reason why I put this here is that it originally presented as cute videos like how to tie a ponytail or how to alter a prom dress. Then you found out the mom was dying and that this was basically a prolonged goodbye letter. There were scenes of her speculating how her daughter would look like a woman, what kind of guy she'd date, the shenanigans her dad and her would do, etc. I found it terrifying that she had to film them all in such short proximity, but it's also pretty wholesome. So compared to some of the disgusting and deplorable acts that we've kind of touched upon so far, this is definitely very wholesome. Still sad, but also, kind of touches you in the heart. Even more so just knowing that this girl that was 3 years old when her mom passed away, apparently, that she still draws strength and encouragement from those videos. So that's pretty cool. Story 13. This isn't really terrifying, but it always gives me the creeps to hear it. It's a video of Alessandro Morisci, who is a castrato singer. This is him singing in 1902, I believe, and he was in his 40s. If you don't know what a castrato is, they basically used to be really popular to use in opera and other genres of music way back a few centuries ago, mostly to use in place of female singers. A castrato is a male singer who's been castrated before puberty. Basically, if a young boy had a high voice in choir or something along those lines, they would be castrated while young so that they wouldn't lose their abilities to reach the high pitches because their voices wouldn't drop due to puberty. Honestly, the recording completely creeps me out because it's such an awful thing in the history of opera, and it's so creepy that only a little under 100 years ago did the last official castrato die. Thousands of boys died while being castrated or after, and this recording is absolutely haunting. Story 14. How about the kid crying while getting a hug from a cop? He's wearing a free hug sign that his physically and mentally abusive mothers forced him to wear to a Michael Brown rally. Years later, they drove off a cliff with their whole family in the minivan. They'd been abusing their adopted family for years prior. Not a recording, but a pretty terrifying picture that gets circle-jerked all over the internet without the real story. Edit. Devonte Hart, if anyone is wondering. Edit. It was a Michael Brown rally. He and Eric Garner's deaths were only weeks apart. I shouldn't have gone from memory on that. Edit. Hey everybody, just so you know, there are about 40 people in this thread that want you to know about a podcast called Broken Hearts that's about the murder cell phone alive. Story 15. Here's a really good one. This cop is giving advice on how to stay safe and avoid becoming victims of a crime. He talks with a reporter about how, quote, anything can happen. Being a female, you could be SA'd, robbed if you're male. Well, it turns out that the cop is none other than Craig Pyre, who 3 days after recording this video, murders Kara Knott after pulling her over. It was found out through the investigation that Pyre had a history of targeting women and making predatory sexual advances on several female drivers. For further reading, I recommend One Day by Gene Weingarten. Edit. Seems I've come across conflicting information, but the consensus is that the interview was recorded after the murder. My bad. Story 16. This video of this guy getting a strike at a bowling alley and showing it off. But he's the guy that killed the old man on Facebook Live by shooting him in the head because his girlfriend Joy Lane broke up with him. Edit. If I recall correctly, this was a big story 3 years ago on Easter Day. Was pretty wild. Also, having seen that Facebook Live video around when it came out, the second the camera flips around and it shows Steven's face makes my stomach sink. It's so effed. Story 17. The TV show The Willis Family that had 2 seasons on TLC. The dad was super controlling of his 12 kids and wife and just gave off creepy vibes. I was shocked though to find out that he had been essaying his own daughters for years, with the oldest saying that essay started when she was 3. All 12 children were homeschooled and did dance and wrestling, but only with each other. They were so isolated from other people. He was also strict about his daughters saving themselves from marriage, even though he was essaying them. There's a clip from the show of him discussing all the kids building houses on his property so his future grandchildren would live close by. It's like he was trying to set up his next victims for when his daughters grew up. The worst part is the mom knew for a while but didn't do anything about it. It was a family friend that ended up reaching out to authorities, which led to his arrest and sentence of 40 years. It's super creepy to see clips of the show knowing what was happening behind closed doors. Story 18. The last Twitch stream of Wreckful. He jokingly comments if it's all a simulation and maybe you get out when you die. He asks if he should try his luck to chat. You can tell he's glancing at his balcony a few times. He jumped from it sometime later. It gets even darker when you learn about his past. His older brother committed self-unalive as well. Edit. It seems he said it a month or so before doing it. Story 19. What about the video that was on Tosh.0 where two girls and the dad tied them in a playful way to the bed? But it was really like a creeper tutorial on how to do this to kids so the creeper could do what they wanted. Tosh said on the show it was creepy, and the guy's whole YouTube channel was weird. A few months later, the FBI or something investigated it, and it turned out the guy was a creeper abusing the girls and exploiting them on this kid's YouTube channel. That video looked creepy innocent until you find out the real story. Story 20. The 2007 movie Waitress. It's about a small-town waitress with a passion for baking who struggles with an abusive husband and an unwanted pregnancy while trying to find happiness and love. It's a sweet and really heartwarming film, and it has some big-name stars. Kerry Russell, Nathan Fillion, Andy Griffith, but most notably to this post, Adrienne Shelley. Adrienne Shelley was not only a co-star and the writer for Waitress, but this movie was also her cinematic debut as a director. When released in 2007, it was very well received for its heart and unique directorial style. However, Adrienne Shelley was murdered in 2006, 3 months before it debuted. Her death was first ruled as self-unalive by hanging before further investigation showed she was murdered by a stranger who staged her self-unalive. Waitress was the only film she would get to direct. The Adrienne Shelley Foundation now exists to support women filmmakers, continuing Shelley's legacy. Honestly, typing this up is making me a bit teary. Waitress is one of my all-time favorite movies, and a great musical as well. And losing someone like Adrienne Shelley just shows how cruel the world can be at times. Edit. Turns out Waitress wasn't her directorial debut, though it may have been her cinematic debut versus direct-to-video. Story 21. Not sure, but the video Lil Peep's brother posted, thinking his brother was just really high. Kid was turning blue and struggling to breathe, but it looked like he was nodding out. Edit. Remembering this more clearly now. It was Bexy, and he made a post saying something like, he was like a brother to me, etc., etc. I'm about as far away from Lil Peep's demo as anyone can be, and I didn't know who he was. The video just haunted me. I came to his music posthumously, and the kid has some serious talent, just couldn't outrun his demons. Story 22. This guy's dolphin encounter. The dolphin that nodded his head with his mouth open is doing an aggressive gesture, not liking how close the guy is. Also, small groups traveling together like that are gangs of males, known to chase females down, abduct them, and gang SA them. Considering that dolphins have tried to SA humans too, he's lucky that this one decided to just leave. Story 23. Don't stand too close to me. Sting was a teacher in the UK for 2 years who taught 11 to 16-year-olds. In an interview, he said the following: I wanted to write a song about sexuality in the classroom. I'd done teaching practice at secondary schools and had been through the business of having 15-year-old girls fancying me, and me really fancying them. How I kept my hands off them, I don't know. Then there was my love for Lolita, which I think is a brilliant novel. But I was looking for the key for 18 months, and suddenly there it was. That opened the gates, and out it came. The teacher, the open page, the virgin, the essay in the car, getting the sack, Nabokov, all of that. Story 24. In 2016, YouTube Brittany Louise Taylor uploaded a video titled, I'm engaged and pregnant. She talks about a man she had met on Tinder, and that she's now pregnant. After the baby was born, it emerged that this man was never in love with her, but was just pretending. He had targeted her for human trafficking and had deliberately got her pregnant in order to sell her baby. With that information, it's really scary how he looks at her at the end of the video, and how he treats her in other clips on her YouTube channel. Fortunately, she escaped the situation and got a restraining order. The scariest thing about this is that he didn't go to prison, and went on to impregnate and marry another Instagrammer, who has since disappeared from social media. be careful when you swipe right, kids. If you want to find out more about the story, Brittany has a book called A Sucky Love Story. It's badly written, but fascinating. ETA, her son is also safe. They live with her mom in Arizona. Story 25. The Watts family murder always gets me. When the story was first kicking up, Chris Watts was interviewed, and I remembered watching it and feeling sympathetic, but uncomfortable. It was a husband/father wishing for his wife and 2 daughters to be safe. However, his general coolness put me off. After, he was perpetrated for their murder. The interview is so incredibly unsettling. It's awkward and unnerving watching it a second time around. Then it gets worse and worse after every time you rewatch it. Story 26. There's a photo of a girl and her mother on a plane. The plane they were on was Malaysia Airlines Flight MH17. Flight 17 was later shot down by a missile over the Ukraine. There were no survivors. Another picture from Flight 17 was a boy and his mother just before takeoff. Another picture is of the plane before takeoff with the caption, "If the plane disappears, this is what it looks like." The reason the guy said this was because 4 months later, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 vanished while going to China. Story 27. There was a celebrity in the UK called Jimmy Savile who presented many BBC programs in the 1970s, especially ones with a younger audience. He did a campaign for seatbelt awareness and was a patron for many charities for the vulnerable. He was probably the most loved celebrity for decades. After his death, he was revealed as the country's worst child sex offender who used his fame and proximity to children to abuse them. Any picture or TV footage of him near kids was probably shot just before or after he essayed someone. Story 28. In the documentary Paris is Burning, there's a moment where a drag queen named Dorian Corey is getting ready and she says, "I always had hopes of being a star, but as you get older, you aim a little lower. Everybody wants to make an impression, some mark upon the world. Then you think you've made a mark on the world if you just get through it, and a few people remember your name. Then you've left a mark. You don't have to bend the whole world. I think it's better to just enjoy it. Pay your dues and just enjoy it. If you shoot an arrow and it goes real high, hooray for you." My impression of her was that she said it with extreme world weariness, like all the fight had gone out of her. After Dorian died, a suitcase was found in her apartment with the decomposing body of a man who had died from a gunshot wound to the head. He had been dead for about 15 years, and Dorian died 3 years after Paris is Burning was released, meaning at the time of shooting the film, she had the body in her closet for many years. It really puts her words in a different light when you rewatch the film. Now look, I'm certainly no expert on the speed of human body decomposition, but I feel like after 15 years it should, if it's not already, nothing but bone left over. I mean, that body should be just straight up a skeleton. If I'm wrong, go ahead and drop it in the comments, but yeah, 15 years, that body should be decomposed, not decomposing. I know that's not the point of the story, but, science. Story 29. Not really seemingly innocent, but Shelley Duvall was severely abused and neglected on the set of The Shining. All staff were told to only interact and acknowledge her if they were mean to her. She wasn't told about most scenes. They just had Jack go after her with an axe. There's so much more bullcrap. She's attributed that movie to her eventual retirement from acting and poor mental health to this day. Edit. Worded it better, as apparently some people are so passionate about The Shining, they'll send disgusting, abusive messages if you aren't completely specific or knowledgeable about everything you comment online. Story 30. It was taken down, but I think a girl on Twitter said she was kidnapped and essayed, and the essayers filmed it and uploaded it to adult content websites. To anyone else just watching, it looks like regular consensual sex. Apparently, there's a ton more essay videos just like that, and adult content websites mostly ignore them. In this girl's case, she contacted them asking for it to be removed, and they kept it up for a while longer to keep making money off of her trauma. Story 31. Reverend Jim Jones looks like just a reverend at a very enthusiastic church. Was actually very well respected and active in fighting for civil rights. He eventually led his followers to the People's Temple in the jungle and had them commit mass self-unalive, or forcefully poison those who would not take it willingly. Over 600 deaths after poisoning the punch with cyanide and then unaliving himself. That's where the term "don't drink the Kool-Aid" comes from. Yeah, I knew it was only a matter of time before someone brought up Jim Jones. This is probably the most classic example of a maniac hiding in plain sight. Very tragic story. Very radical cult, and yeah, that's the gold standard, I think, for the topic of this video. Story 32. Curb Your Enthusiasm were filming in Dodger Stadium during a live watch. If they hadn't been there, a man called Juan Catalan would have gone to death row for murder. The cameras caught footage of him sitting in his seat, and he was exonerated. There's a Netflix documentary on it called Longshot. Story 33. The dashcam footage, I don't know from where, but it's on YouTube, or at least used to be, of a car driving on a 2-lane highway that passes a lorry going the other direction. Then there's suddenly a hole in the windshield and everyone in the car starts wailing and screaming. Turns out a brick flew off the lorry, through the windshield, and killed the mother of the family who was riding shotgun. Gone in an instant in front of her whole family while doing something as mundane as driving down the road. Story 34. Not terrifying, but it seems dark backstories are also fitting enough for the post. In Back to the Future, in the scene after the I am Darth Vader scene, you can visibly tell Marty's dad had just been crying and has a strange shaved on the sides haircut. This is because Crispin Glover, who was about 20 years old at the time of filming, and the producers had disagreed on how the character's hair should look after the Darth Vader scene, and they forced a haircut on him. I don't know if it was physically forced onto him or if they yelled at him until he sat in the damn chair. Either way, it sent him to tears. He also claimed that he was abused by producers in front of extras, which I feel is back up by the confirmed fact that, well, one of the producers are known a-holes, and were a-holes to the guy they hired to replace him in the second movie, but mainly, Glover had to redub some scenes because he was so nervous on set he couldn't even speak. I don't believe the common explanation of this, which was that he was nervous because he was 20 years old and just starting his career. Dude had a main role in Friday the 13th Part 4 and had a couple of other movies beforehand, and he seemed perfectly fine behind the scenes. There's a lot more shady crap behind the BTTF trilogy and Glover being screwed over in the process of it, even leading up to recent times. But this comment is long enough, lol. TLDR, George McFly's weird haircut was forced onto him. You can see him looking upset in the movie, and he was literally bullied and later slandered by producers. I can't see the movies the same way. Edit. For people saying he was on drugs and difficult, and that he's insane or whatever, and therefore his account shouldn't be listened to, I assume people are referring to the David Letterman interviews and his reputation. Yeah, that was a performance. He was literally dressed up as a character from a movie that you can look up, Ruben and Ed. Check it out, it's a cute movie. He's talked about it afterwards, and it's clear it was an intentional act. The director of Ruben and Ed has spoken about Crispin calling him up before the interview and doing the character from the movie on Letterman. He's also talked about being one of his inspirations growing up being Andy Kaufman. No kidding. And as for his difficult reputation, is it so hard to believe the producers who illegally stole his likeness would lie about the dude to make it harder for him to speak up and be believed? If he was so difficult, why would Robert Zemeckis intentionally work with him on a second movie after Back to the Future? Does anyone remember Beowulf? Honestly, people can believe what they want, but this guy was effing screwed over. Doesn't matter if you think he's weird or not. Can't believe people are taking the Hollywood producer side on this. Story 35. My mom and I recently watched one of those 2020 shows, and they were talking about a woman who went out drinking one night and was never seen again. She had gone to one guy's apartment, but hotel footage showed her leave shortly after arriving, and the guy in the apartment swore he didn't do anything to her. But they kept interviewing this one guy, who was the last guy to see her alive. They stopped at a gas station, and he claims that she started talking to another guy, got in his car, and left. He played the whole, if I had only known, I wouldn't have let her go act, with tears and everything. Well, there's footage of him at his job a couple days later, and the footage is super generic. He has a cooler on a rolling cart, and he's putting it in a freezer. He worked for a food production company. When the police interviewed his boss, they asked to see all of her footage, and she obliged. When they got to that part of the footage, him putting the cooler in the freezer, she told police to stop. She said that those coolers were used to store granola bars, and there was zero reason for those bars to be put in the freezer. The girl's body was in there. He took it out back and burned basically everything in a barrel down the alley a couple days later, but it was before the police had seen the footage, and he had bleached his entire van before police could search it. Story 36. Not a video, but a movie, Milo and Otis. I watched it a whole bunch as a kid, only to learn years later that several dogs and cats were needed for the film because they kept dying as a result of the situations the filmmakers put them in. Examples include pug versus bear, cat versus snake, and cat gets thrown off cliff. As a child watching the movie, the thought never really arises that these are real animals, and as an adult, it makes me wonder how the F people could get away with this. Story 37. I can't supply the link because I saw this secondhand, but there's a video online of a man making a joke about how his wife must be feeling really tired today because she's normally up early in the morning and it's past noon and she's still in bed. The entire video is completely innocent, and it's only after the camera stops that he found out she died in her sleep. Story 38. Fire at a nursing home in Sydney back in 2011. TV reporter interviews one of the nurses, Roger Dean, who tells of helping get residents out. Then the police announce he was the one who set the fire to start with to try to cover up his theft of $85 worth of prescription drugs. 11 people died in the fire. So $85 is worth committing arson and being locked up indefinitely? Alrighty then, just another case of insane levels of stupidity here. Moving on. Story 39. The dating game. The concept appeared innocent enough. A woman chooses a bachelor out of the 3 available contestants and they go on a date. However, the game in 1978 turned dark when serial killer Rodney Alcala was nominated to be a contestant and actually won the game. The contestant refused to go out with him on the date because she thought he was actually creepy afterwards. She dodged a bullet. Story 40. Actress Melissa Benoist was on Jimmy Fallon in 2016. She told a story about a time she fell and tore up half her face and one of her eyes. She made jokes about it, and no one really thought about it. Last year, she revealed that one of her exes was very violent when they were together. She revealed that the story she told on Jimmy Fallon was a cover-up story. The real story is that her husband, at the time, had thrown an iPhone at her face. Story 41. I'm writing a book on this very situation. In fact, I'm getting a chill at the moment over this question. I lived with a female, GF, who always wanted to record our bedroom activities. This was 2005/2006, so we used a camcorder. Although not perfectly innocent, I accumulated about a dozen sex tapes by the time we broke up. I wasn't supposed to have the sex tapes either, but I did. For a reason that's way too long to include here, I received a subpoena from an attorney who had a lawsuit against the company the ex worked for. There were maybe 5 minutes out of a dozen 90-minute tapes that I needed to find, then cut out and send to the attorney. While surfing through one of the tapes, I noticed something odd during one of our bedroom romps. My then GF held up her right hand with a clenched fist while I was fiddling with the camera. I was looking in the opposite direction of her, and she's giving the Black Power hand gesture while looking down the hall to our bedroom. Turns out she wasn't a secret Black Panthers operative. She was signaling to someone at the end of the hall that led to our bedroom to hold their position. Over a 10-month period, I found 9 instances over 9 months of my then GF sneaking people into our home while we had sex. I was 42 then, she was 27. It completely changed my life, and not for the good. At least then it wasn't. It wound up involving the police, Texas Rangers, even FBI. I've completed the first draft of the book, and I'm about 3/4 of the way through the first edit. Story 42. Can't find the video of it, but this happened in 2004. A guy named John Sharp lived in the suburb of Mornington in Victoria, Australia, with his wife Anna and 2-year-old daughter Gracie. One day, Anna, who was 5 months pregnant with a boy, and Gracie suddenly vanished. John Sharp made a teary plea to his wife to come home, that she and Gracie were missed, and he loved them both so much, etc., etc. A few days later, police charge a man with the murders of Anna and Gracie. That man was John Sharp. John Sharp shot his wife in the head with a bow and arrow, killing her. He then shot his daughter. The first shot didn't kill 2-year-old Gracie, so he pulled the arrow out of her head and shot her again. He dismembered the bodies, bagged up the parts, and dumped them at the tip. Basically landfill, if you will. He'd first buried the bodies in the backyard, but dug them up after he became worried he'd be found out. He'd even gone so far as to send flowers to Anna's mother overseas, pretending she was still alive, when in actual fact she was buried in the backyard. He got 35 years, and from what I've heard, he spent most of it in solitary, because literally every other prisoner has tried to kill him. 35 years? Not life for committing first-degree murder of your own family? What the hell is up with the justice system in Australia? Story 43. There was an interview where they were telling a man his neighbor died and he was really sad about it. If I'm not wrong, they found her in some trash bags cut into pieces. The guy was the one that killed her, and he was only acting like that because he was worried as he knew he was going to be caught soon. Story 44. The James Bulger video. I'm on mobile and I'm a bit lazy, but it's a seemingly innocent video of a 2-year-old boy, James, holding the hand of an older child. James was tortured and murdered by 2 10-year-old kids who led him away from his mother for a split second at a shopping center. Story 45. Karla Homolka and her former husband, Paul Bernardo's clips that they recorded while essaying and murdering young girls. They even essayed and killed Karla's little sister, Tammy, as Paul was sexually attracted to her. After Tammy had died, Karla wore Tammy's clothes and acted exactly like her, and she and her husband had sex on Tammy's bed. They killed Tammy on Christmas Eve when all their family members were at the home. They were literally having drinks with Tammy, and it looked like just another happy family holiday. Little did anyone know, they essayed, then strangled Tammy after everyone went to sleep. They called the ambulance to avoid being suspects. Later, Tammy's death was announced to be an accident. Her official cause of death was listed as choking on her own vomit. Story 46. The Mick Philpott press conference. In around 2012, there was a big story here in England about Mick and Mariette Philpott. Their house had burned down and they had lost 6 of their children. Philpott had 17 children overall from different relationships. This press conference happened shortly after and shows an emotional pair thanking people for their efforts trying to save the children. Turns out, Philpott was a well-known slimeball who lived off benefits, had numerous kids with different women, and was in an open marriage that only he seemed happy about, and had been on TV before bragging about his life. When one of his mistresses decided she'd had enough and left, she took her kids with her. Philpott didn't like that, so concocted a plan to set fire to his own house, rescue his kids in a feat of heroism, and frame the woman who left him so she'd lose custody of the kids. The fire got out of control way quicker than he expected, and he ended up unaliving his own children. He did that press conference knowing he was responsible. He's now serving life in prison. Edit. There's a great picture out there somewhere taken during the same press conference. It shows one of the police officers assigned to the case with a look of disgust, almost like he's thinking, we know you did it, we just can't prove it yet. Story 47. The Crow. One of the main actors passed away after being shot with a blank round. They finished the film. Edit. I'm awful at names, so I apologize for not mentioning Brandon Lee by name. Try to avoid names if I can't exactly remember them. He was killed by what was supposed to be a dummy cartridge. The crew made it themselves and used live primer, which is why it was a powerful shot. Story 48. The Twilight Zone movie. At first you would think nothing is wrong until you hear what happened during shooting. 2 children were hired illegally to do a scene with Vic Morrow. This isn't even the worst part. While filming a scene, Vic Morrow is holding 2 of the children while walking through water. Then, all of a sudden, a helicopter crashes on top of them. Vic Morrow and one of the kids was beheaded by the helicopter, and the other child got crushed. We then see filmmakers run up towards the crash site to find the horrific sight, and you can see their reaction. They finished the film somehow and made $42 million in 1983. Story 49. When I was in high school, there was some buzz after school that a fellow classmate, a senior and kind of an outsider, had took his own life. Friends and family were on the news saying how he was such a good kid, misguided, and tragic. A few hours later, we found out that he did not unalive himself. He was in custody for murdering his mom, dad, and sister after school. Really disturbing, and I've never been able to shake it, even after all these years. Story 50. The movie Blowup is basically this, but a movie. Spoilers. It's about a guy who takes a picture of a woman at a park, and that woman demands that picture. She follows him around, she seduces him, makes him think she loves him, then takes the picture and leaves. He kept a copy. He blows it up so big it takes up an entire wall, and then he finally sees what she was doing in those bushes. He goes to the bushes afterwards and finds the dead body she was hiding when he took her picture. Story 41. In 2004, a woman named Rachel O'Reilly was brutally murdered in her home north of Dublin in the Republic of Ireland. A few days later, while the police were still investigating the murder, Rachel's husband and parents appeared on The Late Late Show, a national Friday night talk show to discuss the horror they were facing. Rachel's father was a shell of a man who barely spoke a word. He was so crushed. It turned out later that the husband was the murderer and had executed an elaborate plan so that he could be with another woman he was having an affair with. He sat there beside the devastated parents of the woman he viciously bludgeoned to death and told a pack of lies to them and to the million or so people who watched that night, keeping a straight face throughout and acting like a loving widower. It retrospectively makes your blood run cold. Story 52. The Star Wars kid from Vine wielding a golf club who filmed it. He didn't want the video to be public, but after it was leaked, he was relentlessly bullied from age 15 until past graduation, to the point he still talks about the effects today. His name was Raza, but on a more positive note, he used the video to speak out against slander, harassment, and bullying. Edit. Just woke up. Thanks for the clarification. You're right, I think it was before Vine even. I don't have a link, but if you search Star Wars Kid, there's dozens of options and parodies. Story 53. This interview of Ian Huntley is an interview among many that he gave following the disappearance of two schoolgirls named Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. He was the school caretaker and claimed to have been the last to see them walking towards a library. Not only did he and his girlfriend, Maxine Carr, give interviews to the press, but he had even helped with the search efforts. He was later charged with 2 counts of murder as sufficient evidence was brought to light, and his girlfriend was charged with perverting the court of justice. The girlfriend was released and given a new identity, and no one knows where she is now. Ian Huntley is serving 2 life sentences in solitary. Story 54. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Nairo vs. Ali. For those unaware of the recent Smash Bros. Drama, the player Ali was blackmailed by a minor he essayed to intentionally lose tournament sets, including this one to the player Nairo, who had previously essayed the same minor. Furthermore, the match was commentated by Kitaro, who recently admitted to essaying a different minor. Story 55. It's not a video, but every time I hear the song Good Directions by Billy Currington, I imagine the song playing out word for word with no music, in a creepy southern accent, and this lady is just trying to get home, but she's stuck in some backwater, and when she finally escapes Billy and his mother, she gets on what she thinks is the highway, only to be led right back to where she started. And there he is, holding some turnip greens and crunching on a pork rind. Story 56. I spent more time than I'd care to admit watching the videos of Star Wars Kid. What he was doing was perfectly innocent, pretending to be a Jedi wielding a 2-handed saber. Sure, it was goofy, but I used to make silly audio recordings when I was his age, both by myself and with friends. It's what some kids do. But the backstory is, he'd recorded himself on a school video camera, and some classmates decided to humiliate the kid by sharing the video around the school. Then to P2P share sites. It ultimately went viral. From Wikipedia, Raza states he was the victim of cyberbullying, as online commenters responded with critical or bullying messages. In a 2013 interview, Raza states, "What I saw was mean. It was violent. People were trolling me to commit self-unalive." Among the comments online, one commenter called him, quote, "a pox on humanity." He was bullied in person at his school, and he left the campus to pursue private tutoring. He said he lost friends because of the ordeal. He returned to high school for his senior year, went on to finish schooling as a law graduate. The ending is relatively happy. In the 10 years following the propagation of the meme, Raza had become the president of the Patrimoine Trois Rivières Heritage Society. Raza decided to come forward to assert his identity as the Star Wars Kid to help bring to light the type of bullying and negative attention that children might receive in similar incidents with the rise of social media. Story 57. I don't want to link the video because this crap tripped me out for I don't know how long. I think it was in the 70s, but 2 young boys, I think between 7 and 10 years old, kidnapped a 4 to 5-year-old boy from a mall, walked him over to a train track, and did all kinds of brutal crap to him before eventually killing him. The thing that sucks is that so many people saw the little boys walking together and thought nothing of it. There's a video of them walking out of a mall together. It broke my goddamn heart. Story 58. This isn't a recording or anything and isn't terrifying as it is disgusting, but it does come off as innocent at first. In the A Song of Ice and Fire book series by George R.R. Martin, Arya Stark and Jon Snow have this really cute brother-sister relationship, and when they get separated and their lives begin to suck, they often think of each other and how they wanted to be with them. Apparently, later on, they were supposed to have developed an incestuous relationship. Mind you, Arya is 9 and Jon 15, and all those instances of longing were supposed to be the seeds of their love. Thankfully, George scrapped this idea. So, as a Game of Thrones fan that has not read the books, I'm quite glad that this ended up not making the final cut of plot material. We definitely get our fair share of incest and, weird stuff like that. But yeah, Arya and Snow, Yowza. Story 59. Haven't checked the comments, but Polly by Nirvana. Sometimes I can't listen to it knowing what it means now. I'll explain here, but be warned, it's about a not-so-pleasant interaction that involves putting one thing in another by force, if you know what I mean. Basically, on her way home from a concert, a girl is abducted, then tortured and SA'd. Makes me sick now knowing what this means. Polly wants a cracker. I think I should get off her first. I think she wants some water to put out the blowtorch. And then, maybe she would like some food. She asked me to untie her. A chase would be nice for a few. Or how about, let me clip your dirty wings. Let me take a ride. Don't cut yourself. I want some help. To please myself, I've got some rope. You've been told. Truly disturbing knowing what it is now. Story 60. WWF's Over the Edge pay-per-view in May of 1999. About midway through the card, Owen Hart, as his blue blazer character, was set off to face against the Godfather. As Hart was playing the goofy gimmick character, they wanted him to make a superhero-like entrance by descending into the ring from the arena rafters. Unfortunately, due to the poor planning and poor quality equipment, the harness malfunctioned and Owen Hart fell 78 feet, about 24 meters, to the middle of the ring, killing him instantly. The footage of his fall was never broadcast and has since been destroyed, but choosing to continue the show after his death, ringside announcer Jim Ross had to let the audience at home know that a man loved by the entire industry has just died in the ring. Sorry for the quality, but here's the best footage I could find of the live announcement. Vice even produced an episode for their series Dark Side of the Ring, available here, where you see the actual clip used in the stunt that caused his death. The fact the pay-per-view was called Over the Edge and a man fell to his death may just be a crazy coincidence or something much more sinister. Story 61. My friends and I, 14 to 16, have a bunch of videos going through a certain place, quoting vines and laughing. But the reason we do it is because my friend is trying to get over her getting SA'd and only wants to go with other people while recording. We quote vines to lighten the mood. It's a really fun place and she wants to be able to enjoy hanging out there. Not exactly terrifying, but a little unexpected for a video of teens quoting vines and laughing. Story 62. There's a video of the Chinese factory explosion from 10 years ago that has terrified me. Someone was streaming the original blast, not knowing what's coming, when the second massive blast happens and for a split second you think, is he too close? Then, with a first-person view, you see the explosion and just tons of metal debris and a shockwave just decimating everything. Anyone in that area would have had less than a split second to contemplate what was coming. I've never seen a video that really shows how quick and devastating a blast like that is when you're in the blast radius. Story 63. I don't think this necessarily counts, but this one always makes me think. The short video of Anne Frank watching a young couple, newly married, from a second-floor window of her house. It's said to be the only video of her. I think someone who was filming the married couple just happened to swing the camera up and catch her watching. I just find it so unsettling given what happened to her and the millions of Jews killed in the Holocaust. All the lives lost senselessly. She never knew it would be the one and only video she would ever be in. Story 64. I worked for a skydiving company a few years ago and we had a death. Customers who were on the same plane still got their videos, so there are videos with scenes from before the jump. The kid that died, smiling in the background. Then it cuts to a wrist cam footage, so right in the face of the passenger and the skydiving instructor. The instructor has very reflective glasses on, and you can see him, watching his buddy and the customer attached to his buddy fall with a malfunctioning chute. The kid drowned and they never found his body. Somehow, the tandem instructor lived. If you don't know any better, it just looks like your average skydive tandem video. Story 65. This little jingle comes from a game called Splatoon 2. It plays as the main character enters what they think is transportation to the promised land, or the Earth's surface. But it turns out the device is a giant blender that will reformat their matter. The sound effects fly over your head at first because your character is coming close to their death and your team frantically try to save you. But when you listen to the audio alone, you can hear the scream of a single octopus get cut by the blender's blades. Then their insides squirt out of them. Then the screaming turns into chanting. Then the villain's theme plays as a fanfare. Behind that fanfare, you can hear the screams of 10,007 other teenagers who have met your fate, which can easily be mistaken for cheering. After that, the fanfare fades. You can hear the crunching and sloshing of whatever else was left of the children. Story 66. This channel was deleted from YouTube, but there was an actor here in Brazil. He made innocent videos with his cats and some footage from his work as an actor, perhaps as a portfolio. Then he was arrested for child explicit content, and to make matters worse, the news gave really sickening details of his actions. The link is in Portuguese. Edit 1. He wasn't a famous actor by any means, but after he was arrested, I decided to watch his YouTube channel out of curiosity. There were videos of his daily life, his cats, his work, and mostly ordinary stuff. But there was one video that I will always remember. It was the birthday of one of his children, and he filmed himself giving birthday wishes to them. And then he accused their mother of telling lies, saying that she made them hate him. I believe she knew this guy was a monster and wanted to protect her children from their own father. Edit 2. Apparently, he had another YouTube channel. It's also mostly made of ordinary stuff, like the other channel. I watched one of the videos, and it's him complaining about his loud neighbors, which was hypocritical of him since his actions were much worse than giving loud parties or whatever that made him complain about his neighbors. One thing that I remember about the channel that was taken down was that people started commenting on his videos, calling him a creeper, cursing him, and telling him to rot in jail. I personally didn't comment anything, but I supported these comments, since the guy is a horrible person who destroyed lives. I also hope that the children that were affected by his actions were young enough to never remember what he did. Story 67. Zaire versus Brazil, 1974 FIFA World Cup. With Zaire losing 3-0 to Brazil in the 1974 World Cup, the Brazil players line up to take a free kick from just outside the penalty box. Before a Brazil player can shoot, a Zaire defender, Joseph Alunga, breaks free from the wall and seemingly inexplicably launches the ball upfield. It seemed like Alunga was just oblivious to the rules, and this was very much portrayed as a moment of comedy. However, as Zaire were African Cup holders and the only African representatives at the World Cup, they were indeed a competent team who were very aware of the rules of football. As it transpired, the dictator of Zaire at the time, President Mobutu, had promised the players large sums of money for competing at the World Cup. After Zaire's first game, a narrow defeat to Scotland, the players learned that there was no money. For their next game, the players downed tools and were defeated 9-0 by Yugoslavia. An enraged Mobutu informed the players that if they lost by more than 3 goals to Brazil, they would not be allowed to return to Zaire. Facing a free kick to a Brazil side containing some of the world's best footballers while already losing 3-0 must have been a terrifying prospect for the Zaire defenders. Story 68. Any and all video clips of Ted Bundy. He's oddly chill. The Netflix documentary of him is really good and has a lot of the clips. He even defended himself in court, with the judge saying, "You're a bright young man. You would have made a good lawyer, and I would have loved to have you practice in front of me. But you went another way, partner. Take care of yourself. I don't feel any animosity towards you. I want you to know that. Once again, take care of yourself." This was immediately after he had just been convicted of SAing and murdering 4 women. Story 69. Not so innocent, but here it goes. When I was very young, I had read Frida Kahlo's biography. When Salma Hayek's movie came out, I was very excited to see my favorite artist. I expected a lesbian scene to depict her time in France. What I was not expecting was an almost adult content scene with Ashley Judd. It creeped me out. It didn't feel like Salma's or Ashley's type of work, and it certainly didn't seem like a scene that would depict Frida's life, or for a movie that very likely would be shown to high school kids. Fast forward, and it all makes sense now. That pervert of Harvey W. wanted Salma and couldn't have her, so he forced her and Ashley into doing a nude scene so he can watch. It makes me nauseous to think he had a special cut made for himself, and makes me even more nervous of what else he did to other women. I believe Salma was lucky Edward was working on the same project, and was likely never alone with that perv. Story 70. Lysanne Froon's camera. She went hiking with her friend Chris Creamers, and there's a bunch of photos of them posing and having fun along the walk. Then there's a bunch of photos of just pitch black and some blurry shots of rocks and the back of one of the girls' head. They went missing on the walk, and the camera was found later on Froon's backpack, which had washed up on the shore of the river. Investigators believe they got lost or fell down a cliff, and that the pitch black photos were an attempt to signal the search party that was sent out to find them. Story 71. Megan Wants a Millionaire was a show on VH1 about Megan Hauserman, who previously was a contestant on Rock of Love, wanting, well, a millionaire. Anyway, the show only aired 3 episodes before VH1 pulled the show due to one of the contestants, Ryan Alexander Jenkins, brutally murdering his wife, Jasmine Fiore. To impede identification of her body, he removed her teeth and fingers, before stuffing her into a suitcase and tossing her into a dumpster. They managed to identify her body due to the serial number on her breast implants. The crappiest part about all of it is the coroners reported she had only died a few hours before her body was found. Story 72. Susan Smith desperately pleading for the safe return of her 2 children, when in reality she had drowned them in her car. In 1994, this case captured everyone's attention when a young woman named Susan Smith claimed that a black man had taken her car with her 2 young children inside and drove off. For days, she would plead for their return. Days later, it was revealed that she had actually driven the car into a lake with the children inside, and that the carjacking story was false. Some days, she even stood on the shore watching the car sink. Allegedly, no one can verify that except her. Apparently, an investigator just didn't buy her story, although it convinced most people. Keep in mind that this was an international story, in pre-internet 1994. Even friends and family back in my native Venezuela heard about this case. I lived in the States. Even more bizarre was her motive. She had a relationship with a wealthy man, and apparently he wrote her a letter ending it because he didn't want children. To this day, it amazes me how she managed to come off so convincing when being interviewed. Story 73. The most mysterious song on the internet. It's an upbeat European song, in presumably English, from the early to mid-80s. The origins of it have not been found, hence the name. No one knows the artist, the country of origin, the title, etc. Story 74. This will probably be buried, and it's mostly personal to me, but thought I'd share anyway. A few months ago, my mother was on the local news in a segment about teenagers volunteering to help out senior citizens with yard work and home repairs during the sweltering summer. She was on there, sweet as can be, and the kids were talking about being happy to help, and the whole thing was just a cute, simple, feel-good piece. Except, she's a monster, as narcissistic as they come, psychologically abusive, manipulative, and toxic. None of her children talk to her, and personally, I've been in therapy for months trying to finally heal from everything she did/continues to try to do to me. The kicker, though, was one of the ways she liked to punish me for innocuous stuff, like getting a B or having a messy room, was to lock me out of the house to do yard work. She'd do it in the summer with no access to water, food, or the bathroom. I remember one time there were severe thunderstorms and tornado warnings, and I had to hide in the shed. She never came out looking for me and didn't say a word when I finally slinked back inside, wet and terrified. I eventually ran away from home, and I haven't seen her in 17 years, and haven't spoken to her in 10. But no one watching that feel-good piece on the news would know any of that. It makes me think about all the other random people you see in these news segments and what dark secrets they could be hiding as well. Story 75. There's a video of a podcast Chris D'Aila did before it came to light that he was a child predator. Basically, they're talking about Snapchat, and he says something along the lines of, "But the messages go away. You can't save them." Someone corrects him and says that you can take screenshots. You slowly watch him die inside as he realizes how effed he is. Story 76. 4 old ladies, sisters in Mexico, called Las Poquianchis, that were found to be owners of a nightclub that would be the front of a prostitution net. Serial killers of the women who weren't of use to them, and they would perform illegal abortions, and the babies that were born alive would be buried alive, and torture the girls used for prostitution. These ladies would be known in the city as very religious and respectable women. People who knew them couldn't believe such an underground life. They operate from the late 40s and found out on the late 60s. Almost 20 years of business and horror for these girls. Story 77. The Bengal tiger, King, from The Life of Pi, nearly drowned during the filming of the movie. An American Humane Association, AHA official, Gina Johnson, who was meant to be overseeing the safety of the animals, had an email she wrote leaked. The email said, "Last week we almost effing killed King in the water tank. This one take with him went really bad and he got lost trying to swim to the side. Damn near drowned. I think this goes without saying, but don't mention it to anyone, especially the office. I've downplayed the F out of it. Terrifying because the people meant to be overseeing the safety of the animals were the ones trying to cover up the mess. AHA were also accused by the animal handlers involved in the Hobbit trilogy of killing 27 horses, goats, chickens, and sheep because they were kept on a farm with bluffs and sinkholes between takes. Whole bunch of accusations against them from several different movies involving animals. They downplay, cover up, or deny them all. Story 78. Never thought I'd have something to contribute to this, but after reading a few, I realized I got an idea. It's not exactly innocent without context, but it's certainly more haunting with the context. Avenged Sevenfold's song Fiction on their album Nightmare was actually originally called Death and was handed in by their drummer James the Rev Sullivan only days before his death due to accidental overdose. The piano playing and a lot of the vocals were done by the Rev before his death. The band changed the title of the song to Fiction, as that was another of James's nicknames, and kept his already recorded piano and much of his scratch vocals to honor him. What makes it all the more eerie is the lyrics of the song. Some were added after his death, but you can hear the Rev singing the parts he had already written and recorded, and they're very strangely prophetic. For example, "Now you think I understand how this world can overcome a man," and "I hope it's worth it. Here on the highway, yeah, I know, you'll find your own way when I'm not with you." It's one of the most beautiful but sad things I've ever heard to listen to their lead singer, Matt Shadows, sing alongside his friend who has already passed, especially considering the lyrical content of the song. Story 79. Kind of mild compared to everything else in the comments here, but anything by Teenage Venus Angelic becomes a lot more disturbing when you learn the backstory behind her. Basically, a cutesy girl with sweet Lolita outfits and a childlike voice doing makeup tutorials and such. Except what's really going on is something resembling of the plot of Perfect Blue, with some of the accents on top. Story 80. The picture's taken by Chris Creamers and Lisanne Froon. Both girls were hiking in Panama and got lost in the wilderness. Parts of their bodies were found a few months later. A little earlier, their backpack was found, which contained the mobile phone of Lisanne. On it were several attempted 911 calls as well as a set of pictures. The first one seemed like ordinary pictures, with the girl posing in front of the vista. They later on shot about 90 pictures of their surroundings in the middle of the night, apparently to lighten up the area with the flash. It's still unclear if foul play was involved. Story 81. IDK if terrifying is the right word, but upsetting? Definitely for me. The pufferfish eating the carrot. It's choking, and I only realized after first seeing it. The first time I watched it was a short portion of the full clip, and it was just the pufferfish with a little bit of carrot in its mouth, and it looked like it was eating it at a glance. Like maybe 3 to 4 frames of the full video on a repeat. Later saw the full video and was like, damn, that's effed up. Story 82. I know I'm late to the party, but I think one of the eeriest videos I've seen is this one. Backstory. On March 4th, 1966, Canadian Pacific Airlines Flight 402 crash-landed on approach to Tokyo International Airport in Japan, just short of the runway. Of the 72 people on board, only 8 survived. Less than 24 hours later, a plane spotter was taping the wreckage of the flight and happened to record BOAC Flight 911 in the background taking off beside the wreckage. Flight 911 would disintegrate over Mount Fuji several minutes later due to extreme turbulence, killing everybody on board. Here's the video of Flight 911 taking off. It's quite eerie to think this was the last video of 124 people who didn't realize they were minutes away from death.